And today on Focus at 4, we're talking about elections. But here's the thing, not just U.S. elections. While Super Tuesday voting is underway here in the U.S., Iran is releasing results from their elections. And here are some of the numbers. Iranian moderates have won a majority in parliament and in a top clerical body charged with selecting the next supreme leader. This is a major blow to hardliners and in the first elections since last summer's landmark nuclear agreement with world powers. Apparently, reformists who favor expanded social freedoms and engagement with the West, with us, won at least 85 seats. Moderate conservatives who also supported the nuclear agreement won 73, giving those two camps together a majority in the 290-seat assembly. Now, that's a lot of numbers about a place that is very far away from here. So here to help give some perspective on why this is important to us is Dr. Dave McIntyre, former dean of the National War College, now teaching Homeland Security at the Bush School over at Texas A&M. So clearly the guy to go to for this. What you mentioned before the interview that we needed to put this into context. First thing, which essentially is, what does Iran think of itself? What's their national image?
What is it that they want out of the world? Well, they see themselves as deserving a position as a major power in the world. They were a major empire bestriding the world 500 years before Christ was done, 1,000 years before Muhammad was born. And they see that their diminished role today is the fault of the West and the Jews in Israel and the Americans, and that they need to push back and regain that position. So from that sort of mindset, that explains why we have had a hard time dealing with them.
Right, because that is such a tough question to answer, and I know it's a question in a lot of people's minds. Why is there this conflict there? So putting it in some historical and cultural context there. So then in that context, these elections, putting more moderates and more reformists in there who seem willing to work with the West, what is the significance of that?
Well, the Obama administration hopes that this is exactly what they have been hoping for. Their argument all along has been that if we can open up their economy and begin to get that to move, bring them to the table, have some discussions with them, that we can bring them into the world community, open up freedoms at home and let people say, geez, life's pretty good here. Why do we want to build these nuclear weapons? Why would we go to war with Israel? What's that all about? Perhaps that is the case. There's another side, there's another argument. The other argument is that in order to run in Iran, you have to be passed by a council that's essentially selected by the religious radicals. About 50% of the people who applied to run were not allowed to run. About 80% of those who ran for religious positions were not allowed to run. So one argument is the moderates won. Another argument is those who won were the ones selected by the senior religious leaders as least likely to cause trouble.
Interesting. So all these articles that we've seen, I'm reading New York Times, reading CBS News, and everybody says, check this out. It's happening. They're going to work with the West, but let's hope so, but there might be some bureaucracy, some backdoor stuff that's kind of making this happen.
We're going to see how it works out. Remember that from their perspective, we spent several decades controlling Iran using the Shah, then several decades balancing Iran against Iraq, and then several decades opposing Iran directly. And so their question now is, why should we trust you to work with us? So I think it is a step forward, but I'm not wildly enthusiastic. I think trust but verify is what Ronald Reagan said, and so I think this is a good step forward. Remember this, Iran still has troops on the ground in Iraq, working with Russians. They've spent the last several months killing all the forces we put in place that were moderate forces in Iraq. They have not engaged against ISIS in Iraq and Al-Qaeda. They have engaged against the moderates in Iraq that we've been supporting, and those troops are still on the ground. So whether they're able to work with us, let's hope so. This is still a very dangerous part of the world, and the end has not yet been written.
Briefly, in the last minute or so that we have left, this governing body that could pick the next supreme leader and has this majority of the moderates or the reformists, why is that so significant?
Well, of course, because they would decide the person who decides the religious direction. Remember, the Iranians don't see a separation of church and state. They have different bodies, but they don't have a separation. So whoever handles the political side of the world of their lives has to do so in concert with religious guidance. Now, once again, that's the panel. The people that ran for that panel had to be approved by the senior, more radical religious group, and 80% of the applicants to run weren't allowed to run. So So let's hope that what we're seeing is moderates ready to work with our administration, and our administration certainly ready to work with them. But let's keep an eye on the fact that it's not as if you simply pay your fee in Austin and you get to put your name on the ballot. That's not the way it worked in Iran.
So maybe some shady dealings in how these people ended up in these positions, but still, perhaps a step forward.
Let's hope so.
We're cautious.
Reason to be optimistic.
Reason to be optimistic. Hey, we'll end it there. Dr. Dave McIntyre, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for the invitation.
Giving us some perspective that, of course, many of us do not have. Hey, stick with us on First News at 4. We've got a whole lot coming up, more Super Tuesday coverage, and we are talking to the leader of the local BBB about some changes that might be coming to that. So stay tuned.